All right, so next we're going to jump into Photoshop and take a look at the filter menu and what's going on in there. All right, so right up here we have the filter menu. If I open it up, we're going to see some things, obviously. So the first thing we see is actually grayed out. Now, what this first thing in the filter menu always is, it's going to be the last filter that you used, along with the last settings that you used. So this can be helpful because you might need to apply a filter over and over to different parts of an image. This happens a lot with retouching skin to be specific. But it's just important to know, because if you, let's say, use a blur filter, but then you want to use it again, but with different settings, instead of clicking it up here, you would instead want to actually find the filter again down here in the menu. All right, next we have Convert for Smart Filters. So what this does is it converts your layer to a smart object. Now before I do this, I'm actually going to make a couple copies. And if you remember, to make copies of layers, there's a couple ways to do this. One way is to click and drag it down to the little plus sign at the bottom of the layers panel and let go. It'll create you a new layer. Or you can hit Command J as keyboard shortcut and it'll create a new layer there. So let's go to this one again and come back to the filter menu. And when I click on Convert for Smart Filters, I get this this box that lets me know that it's going to be converted into a smart object. Perfect, that's what we want. I'm going to click OK. Now another way to convert to a smart object, let's say if for other reasons you want to convert to a smart object, you can right click on a layer and then, let's see, right click on a layer, there we go, and go to Convert to Smart Object, and it's going to convert. Now how do you know it's a smart object? If you look down here, there's actually this little icon. It looks like a couple pieces of paper, and now they're both on this layer, so that means that they're both smart objects. This is important because once you add a filter, you'll be able to go back and adjust or re-edit that filter and the effects. Awesomeness. So next, let's keep on going. Now, neural filters is something that's really new. It's actually in beta testing right now. So we're not going to go over this because I'm expecting it to change quite a bit, but that is something to look forward to for the future. Next we have Filter Gallery, and Filter Gallery has a whole lot of the original filters that came with Photoshop and a lot of helpful filters. So, but right now you can see that it's grayed out. So, thinking back to the last video, if something is grayed out, do you guys remember why that might be? All right, so if you said that it's because we're working in a 16-bit image, then you are correct. So how do I know this is a 16-bit image? There's a couple ways, but the easiest way to see is right up here in the file title. We have the actual file name, how big we're viewing it as right now, what layer we're on, and RGB is the color space we're in, and then 16 means that we're in 16-bit mode. Now if you remember when we had talked about bits, 16-bit has a whole lot more colors and tones, but in this case it's not going to be helpful for us because we can't use those other filters. There's a lot of work, computer work that happens behind the scenes in the software when you use these filters, and so it's not able to process it with a full 16-bit image. So if that's the case, this would be the time where you'd want to go ahead and save a copy so that you can work with this in the filter gallery. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to go ahead and save a copy, and I'm just going to call it Filter Fun for now. Okay, and hey, I'm going to add 8-bit just so I remember that this is actually an 8-bit image and not my full 16-bit image anymore. All right, let's hit save, and you can see right here it's telling me it's saving. Down here we also have a bar that says it's saving. All right, we'll let it finish up. Let's keep going. All right, so now that I've gone ahead and saved it as its own, image, we're going to go ahead and come up here to Image and Mode, and we can come down here to 8 bits per channel, and that is going to convert me to an 8-bit image. You can see right up here that the 8 has now been converted, or the 16 has changed to an 8. Awesome, we're in 8-bit mode. Yay! Alright, so we keep going down a bit. I've got some other filters going on, and I'm going to jump into the filter gallery in a little while here, but we're going to just go over the basics real quick. You know, a lot of these filters are really geared, these ones right up here, towards photographers. Adaptive wide angle has to do with using wide angle lenses. Camera raw filter is kind of like a way to edit photos similar to an app with sliders, and we actually are going to go into and talk about camera raw and camera raw filter a little bit later in the semester, so I'm not going to worry about that today. Lens correction is to help with lens issues like distortion. Chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration is when, if you've ever seen on an image, there's like a slight like cyan or magenta like weird edge on some of the edges of in the image. That's what chromatic aberration is, and this is where you would fix it. Liquify, we'll talk about this in a video coming up right now. This is a really fun filter to play with. It also gives Photoshop and Photoshoppers a bad name, because when you don't use it well, it can go really bad really fast. So we'll get into that a little bit later. We have, when you're working with 3D type of stuff, we have these filters here, blur filters, which there's a lot of fun stuff to go on in there. Blur gallery. Now blur gallery is has a little bit more control over the blurs. This is actually newer than the regular blurs. Both useful for different things. Okay, we have distortions, such as pinching and ripples and shears and twirls and waves and zigzags. So zigzags, that one I talked about in the previous video, where it might not seem like it's a big deal, but then when you combine it with other filters, you can actually create some really cool effects. Noise, getting rid of dust and scratches, filters that have to do with pixelation, creating new things such as clouds. That's the main time I ever use it, is for clouds and fibers. You can also add a lens flare with renders, different sharpening filters, stylizing like embossing. There's an oil paint filter here that's a little bit more advanced than the oil paint filter we're going to look at in the filter gallery. There's some video specific type of filters, and then some other filters that, along with like the same idea that I talked about with the zigzag, that on their own they might not seem like they do much, but when you combine them with other filters, you can really create some fun effects. Alright, so that's the basics of the filter menu. In the next video, we're going to be looking at the filter gallery.